Welcome to the Overflow Worship Podcast. We are excited to see God do something new in His church through worship, and we want to come alongside of those in worship ministry with encouragement and practical tools for the journey. Hey everybody, welcome to the Overflow Worship Podcast. I'm your host, Andrea Olson. Thanks so much for joining us. This is so exciting. It's episode 2, so this is the very beginning. All of you listening, you are in on the ground floor, so welcome. I'm so excited that you're listening and that you're joining us and choosing to spend your time with us. So this podcast is going to be all about encouragement and practical tips for worship leaders, for worship team members, for anybody in worship ministry. And I hope that it's an encouragement for those in ministry in general, just to encourage you along your journey. But today I am going to the practical side of things, and we are going to talk about rehearsals. And when I think of rehearsals, I think of a lot of things, and happiness is not one of them. I have never heard anybody say, "Oh yes, rehearsals are my favorite. I love them. I can't wait to get there." It's usually something like this. "Oh, I have worship team rehearsal. Oh, I can't do that. I have rehearsal." And it's just one of those things that it's never been very fun, but it doesn't have to be this really difficult thing that you dread. And so today I am going to just try to dive in and give you some tips, whether you're the worship leader or you're the worship team member, and hopefully you can walk away feeling like you have some tools in your toolbox to help you get through rehearsal without feeling like you want to tear your hair out. And so we're just going to dive right in. So I want to start with you as worship leaders. You know, a big part of being a worship leader is being prepared spiritually yourself. And, really, honestly, this goes for everybody. Leaders, team members. I shouldn't have singled out the leaders first because this is not just for the leaders. The spiritual preparation is for everybody on the team. I don't care where you are. If you're back in the tech booth, if you're running lyrics, if you're on the stage, if you're a supporting instrument, everywhere, you need to prepare yourself spiritually. And I will dive into this more in another session, but please understand that this is of the utmost importance. And part of that is preparing your heart for the amount of energy and the amount of just spiritual battle that you're about to face and the amount of energy that you're about to pour out. And so you need to find time in your week, in your days, to refill. So that's sitting down and spending private worship time, that's spending time in the Word. And it may sound redundant to you, but the reason that you hear it over and over and over again from so many different people is because it's so, so important. And so I just encourage you to fight for that time. I got to tell you, back when I was first starting to lead worship, my husband and I had just gotten married. I had just stepped into a worship leadership role in the church that we were attending, and my husband was youth pastor there. And I remember one Saturday morning, we always had rehearsal on Saturday night. And that's just the way that they had always done it. It worked really well for their people. And so we always had rehearsal then, and that was totally fine. And I just remember one Saturday morning just feeling spent, just feeling overwhelmed, feeling frustrated, feeling like I wasn't ready for rehearsal and I didn't want to go. And as I was talking with my husband about it, we just realized that it was the culmination of a lot of spiritual battle that I didn't really know how to work through. I didn't know exactly what I was facing because it was new to me. I was a new worship leader. But then also just a lack of preparation on my behalf spiritually. I wasn't spending enough time in private worship. I wasn't spending enough time in the Word, and I wasn't preparing my heart and my soul for that time that I was going to be pouring out. So I was leading out of emptiness. And so if you know what I'm talking about, it's just like you're scraping the bottom of the barrel and there's nothing left to give. And so I really had to work hard to switch that and start pouring into myself so that I was leading out of a place of overflow. And you might be wondering, how in the world does this apply to rehearsal? Well, it's really an attitude and a mindset. For all of you team members, then you walk into rehearsal, you walk into, whether it's Tuesday or Wednesday or Monday, whatever day your rehearsal is, it doesn't matter. You walk into rehearsal already filled up, already overflowing, and you're mentally and spiritually prepared for what you're about to walk into. And so that is step number one for the whole team, no matter who you are, where you serve on the team, prepare yourself spiritually. So now I'm going to dive into the practical side. So, practically preparing for rehearsal. That's really what this is all about. If you don't come to rehearsal prepared, that's why it's going to be frustrating. So, for the worship leader, here's how you can prepare. Number one, make sure that you know your music inside and out. Anytime I work with a team, I say, guys, rehearsal is not for learning your music. It's not for making the tracks if you're using tracks. Rehearsal is for putting all the pieces together and refining things and kind of mending or melding everything together. And so you as the worship leader, your job is to go before the Lord and really press in about what the songs are to be for that weekend. Talk with your leadership, or maybe you're preparing several weeks in advance. That's great. So whatever Sunday you're working on, you're going before the Lord and asking what He has for that weekend. And then you yourself are practically spending time preparing on your instrument and vocally, however you lead. You need to be ready. You need to know inside and out every chord change, every structure, every map of every song, so that you can clearly communicate that to your team. Because if you have even the simplest thing like a chord structure, if you have a change that you want to make and you're not sure about it, or you're not sure where it is, or you didn't realize that, the chord chart was wrong, if you downloaded something direct from a site where you pre-purchased it and you didn't realize that the structure was wrong because you didn't look at it beforehand, then that's extra time spent in rehearsal, which could be frustrating for your team members because they're waiting for that to be fixed and new charts to be run and that kind of thing. So I just encourage you to really spend time preparing so that you know the music inside and out. Then you are able to clearly communicate to your team. And then number two, the best thing that you can do for your team is to over-resource them. Give them as much information as you possibly can so that they are ready for rehearsal. So I set a rule with the other worship leaders that we would have the songs in Planning Center by Wednesday of the Sunday prior. So they had 4 days to go in and listen to new songs, look at the resources, all of that. Now, that even is pretty short. So I would try to do it sooner than that, but that was kind of the deadline. So if you're preparing weeks in advance, you have an advantage because you can be putting them in several weeks in advance. That gives your team a lot of time. And then communicate with them. Okay, team, all the songs are in, all the resources are there. So let's say, for example, you use Planning Center, which is a great tool for worship leaders and churches to plan their services. You can link all of your information, all of your resources right there. So let's say you want to link a YouTube demo of the song, you can do that. You want to link a chord chart, you can do that. You want to link vocal charts with harmonies and all of that, you can do all that there. But whatever you do, make sure that your team has everything that they need to learn their part. And I encourage you, worship leaders, make yourself available to your team. They may have questions, or they may say, hey, I would like to learn an alto part, but I don't hear it. Could I get together with you and work on that? And make yourself available, maybe a few minutes prior to rehearsal to run through those things or to just talk through some of those things. So that rehearsal, again, is for really just putting the pieces together. And so those are kind of my top 2 tips for the worship leader in being prepared for rehearsal so that it runs smoothly. And then for the worship team members, whether you serve on, the drums, or you're a singer or a guitar player, use those resources. And if your worship leader isn't giving them to you, ask for them. Or maybe ask a question, say, hey, I see we're doing a new song this weekend. Who does that song? Could I look it up on YouTube? Very simple, because then you are as prepared as possible. I encourage you to try to surprise your worship leader with how prepared you are. And that doesn't mean that everything has to be absolutely perfect and we never, ever, ever make mistakes. That's absolutely not it at all. Really, like my heart behind coming prepared to a rehearsal is so that we honor and respect each other. And that really just builds a stronger team. And then you build trust with one another because you know, like, hey, we respect each other because we respect each other's time. We come to rehearsal prepared and all of those things. So I encourage you to utilize the resources that your leader gives you. And if they don't give you any resources yet, then try to find them and ask for them. And then dive in and prepare with them. So that means you need to play through your chord progressions beforehand. That means if you see, as a guitar player, the song is in F sharp, maybe ask some questions about what you need to do to learn how to play that song in F sharp if you're not sure, or get a capo, or, you can fill in the blank there, but just kind of doing that research and preparation beforehand so you don't walk into rehearsal and have 20 minutes of preparation that you need to do while the rest of the team waits for you. And, that's only going to give you more time to build on that in rehearsal. And again, this has nothing to do with perfection and everything to do with honoring each other and pursuing the best that we can possibly be for the Lord. And that's really what this is all about and what this whole rehearsal conversation is about. And so those are kind of my top tips for the worship leader and my top tips for the team members in order to come to rehearsal prepared. And that preparation is how to achieve a rehearsal that doesn't drive you crazy because you'll come together and everyone's ready and prepared and you can start playing and ready, set, go. And that's just such a wonderful thing. All of you will feel much less stressed or much less irritation along the way if you have that in your rehearsals. That might decrease. So once you're in rehearsal, that's a whole nother thing. And so for the worship leader or for the person who runs the rehearsals, I want to give you just a couple little tips that I've learned along the way. And I'm still learning. I love to learn and I never want to get to the point where I think I should stop growing or that I know it all. So, because I definitely don't. But these are some of the things that I've learned along the way that have really worked well. And so the first thing is clear communication to your team during rehearsal. So what I like to do is I like to start off the rehearsal with prayer so that we go to the right place first and we quiet our hearts and prepare our hearts first. And then what I do is give a roadmap of the Sunday. So here's where we're starting and here's where we're going next and here's where we're ending. And that really helps the team kind of grab on to how the rehearsal is going to go as well and gives them a roadmap of the Sunday. And then each song I will communicate clearly. So usually in the services that I've led, there'll be 2 songs at the beginning. And so I'll kind of talk through those 2 songs first or that opening set and say, here's the first song, we're going to use tracks on this song. Here's how the tracks start. And then I kind of give a roadmap of the song saying, this is where we're going to go. This is how it's different than the recording. Things like here's a chord structure change. And I'll just kind of demonstrate some things and give some highlights. And then what I'll do is say, okay, here we go. We're just going to start it and go through it so we get going. And then we'll ask questions afterwards and iron out details and go from there. And so that's kind of a general idea. I just like to over communicate in rehearsals because it's helpful. And then being open for questions. So, really trying to bring the team along and not just bulldozing through and saying, okay, I hope you follow me. At the end of each song, I would say, okay, did anybody miss a chord progression or did anybody have questions about that? And then we can, iron out some things and work through some things. But that preparation beforehand really helps so that you can just jump in, roadmap, and take off. And that's just a really awesome thing. Now, for the worship team members, your job or your role is to really come alongside and support your worship leader. They are the ones who have been, on their knees before the Lord, asking what his plan is and his will is for that Sunday. And they've been talking with leadership and talking with, the pastor or whomever they report to or discuss service orders with throughout the week. And so our goal and our role as a worship team member is to support and to honor that. One of the things that I've done in the worship teams that I've worked with is said, we need to have a healthy respect of the worship leader and save questions like, hey, could we do this chorus 2 times? Or hey, could we do this song instead? Save questions like that for after the rehearsal, just because it respects and honors all the preparation that the worship leader has done. And it does help the rehearsal to continue to flow as well. And so that's kind of a general idea for how I like to run rehearsals. And again, it doesn't mean that you never ask questions. It doesn't mean that you never take extra time. That's really the antithesis. It's more about the preparation helps so that you can spend time on the important things in rehearsal and not on the things that just should have been worked out before, like, I don't know, tuning the guitar or those types of things that really you could work out before, or forgetting a key piece of your instrument at home. Those types of preparations, or learning key chord progressions, all of that can be done prior so that you can really focus on the important things in rehearsal. It's such a wonderful thing. And you may walk away from a rehearsal. If you do those things, you may walk away from a rehearsal going, oh, that was kind of fun. And I actually just felt like I had a worship experience. And you don't walk away frustrated or exhausted. So again, I definitely don't have all the answers, but those are a few of the things that I have learned along the way that I feel like have really helped to make rehearsals successful and make them less frustrating. And another thing that is really helpful for you worship leaders and tech team members is to connect with one another beforehand. And sound engineers, if you are running the soundboard that weekend, I would encourage you to get to rehearsal early, get everything turned on early, and just make sure that everything's working properly. I can't tell you how many times that everything works, the day before, but then somehow, mysteriously, at 5:58 p.m. on Saturday night, when rehearsal's supposed to start at 6, it doesn't work. Or the monitors aren't working, or all the batteries and all the mics are dead, or you fill in the blank. And so I would encourage you that is your role of preparation, is to make sure that everything is ready to go. And again, that doesn't mean that you can never have a problem. They happen often. But I think the goal to remember is our job is to do everything that we know to do, right? It doesn't mean that we don't have unforeseen circumstances, and it doesn't mean that we never have mistakes or that it's always perfect. But we want to come to the end of the day and say, I did everything that I knew to do to come and be prepared to honor my team members and to honor the Lord. And, I know that that's the heart behind each one of you who are wanting to be on the worship team and serve the Lord and serve in worship or on a supporting role of the team. But sometimes we get lost in the details, right? Sometimes it's hard to not get overwhelmed by, arrivals and sound checks and rehearsals and all of those things. And so I just encourage you to do everything that you know to do, to be ready and be prepared, and then, let God take care of the other things that are out of our control. And as I wrap up today, I just want to remind you, and this is a topic that I'll dive into more another time, but it's so important for us to remember that we don't pursue excellence so that people look at us. So all of this stuff, all of these preparations, the practice on your instrument, and showing up early to make sure the batteries are tested and the sound system is on, and learning your part so that you know it well. It's not so that people will look at us. We pursue excellence so that people are not distracted by us, because our role is to point people to Jesus. Thank you so much for spending your time with us today. If you'd like to stay connected, please subscribe to our podcast. And if you want to learn more about Overflow, visit overflowworship.com. And remember, we love the church. We are for you and we're praying for you. Have a great day.